Welcome to the Roundtable. This is Chip. That is Jeff, co-host of the Roundtable. Today we have a cool guest. We have none other than Mr. N. Who is Mr. N? We're going to dive a little bit deeper, find out exactly who he is or what he's about, and also why he's wearing this face covering. Little hint, it's for privacy. Let's go.
And now, the Roundtable with Jeff and Chip on the chain.
And here we get going. Jeff, how you doing tonight? What's going on?
Doing awesome. Doing really good. Looking forward to today's conversation. It's not often that we have somebody that has been in Bitcoin for as long as Mr. N has been in Bitcoin.
Yeah, and I'll share something too. Nin, how are you doing, Mr. N?
Very well, thank you.
Good for you to join us here. So I will tell you guys a little something about Mr. N here. So this is the person who's responsible for beating me with a lead pipe over the head when I was telling him that Bitcoin was a scam and it was dumb and who's ever going to use this. And this goes back, and we're old pals, so this goes back to early 2010s here. And he kept talking about it. And, gradually I started doing a little research. But what was I like back in those days, Mr. N?
Yeah, you dismissed it instantly, and it was. I knew it was world changing when not long after I heard about it, but trying to convince not just you, other friends as well, to start learning about it, because I can remember when the internet started. When the World Wide Web started. And I knew that was going to change the world, and I got deep into that quick. And people they wouldn't believe how much of a change was coming. And I saw that then. I missed Facebook, missed the social media, but again, I had the same feelings when I first learned about Bitcoin. And it's a bit like when somebody's really religious and they start telling you about their religion. That's what I feel like, and you keep knocking on them, listen to this, but it's very difficult.
Yeah, we run in a circle with another friend, and the other friend still is, but it's not backed by anything. And I always bring up, well, what is the US dollar backed by? It's backed by a promise. It's backed by a thought. It doesn't mean anything, and they print it on will. So I'm like, so that's not a strong argument for why you wouldn't like something like Bitcoin. And I have to say, because of Bitcoin, none of us would be here today. And I always say that I'm forever in gratitude for you to keep on, because thank God you were one of those friends that kept hitting me with it. And I did buy some early on. And as things would happen, I made a little bit of money and thought it was awesome. It's like if you double 2x your money, you buy a stock, you 2x your money. That's a pretty good return, right, Jeff? You get 2x or 3x. You're happy. You're like, trading. But you're not happy if it ends up going to 20K. Then you're not so happy. But you realize that at least you took gains, And back then in the day, I don't think, we always knew it would perform well. But even when it went to 20K back in the last bull run, did you see that coming?
Yeah, I knew for Bitcoin to work, it has to be above 1 million, more like 10 million, and we're always expecting it to go up to that level. It needs that much value in the system to be, to work globally as a money system for everybody. And I believe that will happen one day. But to get there, there's the troughs and peaks on the way up. Mm-hmm. We knew it was going to go 20, but we didn't think it was going to pull back that fast.
How about the person that bought it at 19,999?
Yeah, I was talking to somebody yesterday who I told about Bitcoin, and they got in about $2,000.
Oh.
And they were buying a house, and they needed some more money. So reluctantly, it's seen Bitcoin going up to $20,000, and he sold as it was still going up. and the next day is when it started dropping. So that person made the most most out of one Bitcoin that I know.
That's amazing. I mean, that's really, yeah. And there's always a bag holder on the other side, but to your point, this is where it gets difficult for a lot of people, because you're looking at future value, future potential, so if you told somebody, when they bought into Amazon, at $1,000, and let's say it retracted back to 700 or 600, that one day it's going to be 1,800, and they're sitting there at 600. They say, yeah, but I'm down $400. It's the same kind of mindset here. You're going from 20,000 though, and it retracts all the way back down to 6, and you're looking at it, you're like, holy crap, what do I do? But to your first, point on Bitcoin, and this, there, the whole space is in its infancy right now. So there's a lot of room to scale the digital asset space, and we're just scratching the surface. You don't have, global adoption. You have a fraction of a percentage of the people that are working with it and playing with it, and it's beginning little by little. We see the stages of adoption, but what do you tell those people? I mean, now you're saying, in order for it to be effective, $1 million, $10 million, what does that look like? Is that 100 years from now? Is that 10 years from now? I mean, if you were to forecast it out, not saying you're, just as a argumentative sake to discuss it, what are your thoughts?
Well, we can't tell, but my personal thought is, within less than 10 years, it'll be over 5 million. I'd say that per Bitcoin.
That sounds pretty good to me. I have to be honest with you on that one. But that's the whole idea of having the sats too, right? It's like the few people that will own Bitcoins, like can say I have a denomination of 1 or more, will be fraction. There'll be just a small number of those folks, because if it's worth, when it gets to $10 million, right? If it's 10 million USD, everything's gonna be broken down into sats, because you're gonna all of these have fractional stuff, unless you have that kind of money. But that's the whole idea of the fractional, is that a lot of people that get into crypto, they go, well, Bitcoin is, it's under 10 or 10, or it's over 10. But I think what they miss is the fact that they can continue buying a little bit at a time and adding to that. They always look at it, well, I don't have 10 grand. Back when it came down to 3,000 USD, people say like, well, I don't have $3,000 laying around, but you didn't need it. You put $100 in at a time, and then you could kind of grow that.
Totally. I mean, I think eventually there'll be subsats. There'll be some kind of hard fork where, subsats will be used.
Right, and that does make a lot of sense. So the reason you're doing this for privacy, because you do run in a lot of the circles. You've been around the space for a long time. Again, you got me into it, and so you do know some of the players out there. So, for example, you've hung out with Tone Vase.
Yeah, Tone's a good friend of mine. Yeah.
Yeah, so and it's like he has not been kind to a lot of the communities we run into, which is the holy cow, there it is, the XRP. A minute over this, the XRP. So he's always like saying ratting on it and saying it's this and that. I've been trying to get him. There's a guy in our space, Sam I Am. He's been wanting to debate him. I thought it would make for a good show anyway. So maybe you can put the good word in. I'd love to see Sam I Am and Tone get down and talk a little bit about Bitcoin. And he's been very respectful. As a matter of fact, Sam's done a lot of conversations with some Aussies too, who are really steeped heavily in Bitcoin. But they would have a pretty good conversation back and forth, because again, he's not necessarily a maximalist in any one. But I do find that what we do in crypto, it tends to be a little tribal. Do you see that people kind of gather towards whatever their coin is? I'm a Litecoin person. I'm an Ethereum person. I'm XRP. I'm whatever. Hedera Hashgraph.
I think that's just human psychology. When you put your mind to something, and you start learning about it, and you take like ownership of the thing. Then when somebody knocks it, you have to defend it, and then it becomes more part of your person, yeah. And then you meet brothers in arms, sisters in arms,
right.
and then you become tribal, and then it's us versus them. It's just very human.
Well
Yeah,
said.
do you think that also has to do with the fact that, you know, there's communities around it? You know, I mean, if you're investing, and I always balance this out with investing, you know, even if you're trading, you know, FX, you know, do you get so passionate about a specific currency that you're trading? I'm not, you know, or a specific stock that you get into. I've never seen anything like it. I've
Yeah,
never seen people invest in Microsoft. Say, oh, I'm a Microsoft maxi. I'm never going to invest in Apple. I mean, it never happens.
I think because Bitcoin's an open source technology, that nobody actually is in charge of it. So you have more ownership in a way of the technology. And you know, when you see the Fed printing money like crazy, and you think this whole system is just so corrupt, and it's going to definitely be replaced by something. And that something looks more and more day by day looks like it's going to be Bitcoin or a cryptocurrency. And you know, so it's world changing, and you know, you get so deep into it, you fall down that rabbit hole, and it's very very difficult to come out of it. And it's very difficult to go to a party and not talk about Bitcoin for 5 hours, bore everybody stiff.
Like, what the hell are you talking about?
Yeah, Stephen, you said to me, just start talking about Bitcoin.
Right.
Well,
Just for a
listen, I've
minute.
learned, but Jeff, we've learned our lesson too, man. It's like all somebody has to say is, "Hey, I heard you're into crypto." All of a sudden, it's like flipping a switch. What? And it's like you put the big
You're
box
interested?
down, you jump up on top of it, you get the barker horn. Everybody, hear you, start doing your thing, you know?
Yeah.
And I just now I kind of like try not to. I'm like, yeah, because then there's the people. This is the people I like too. They go like, yeah. So how's that cryptocurrency working for you, huh? How you doing, man?
When it's dropped a bit, and then they text
they always
you.
want to hammer you about that. How's that going, huh? You doing well?
How's
How
that
you doing
going
with
for
it?
you?
I go,
Where's
yeah,
that
it's gone.
Bitcoin thing? Wait,
I go, it's gone
how's that?
down a little bit, but you know, and they're like, see, they always want to be like, yeah, you know.
Yeah. Now, Mr. N, you bring up, you know, the fact of global adoption and where's Bitcoin going to go, and you know, what is the future going to look like? Now, it's interesting too because as we look around the world, and there's a number of different points that we'll bring up throughout today's conversation, but I think there's a perfect time when we're you know, you're talking about the Fed printing money.
Fred.
You know, the
Fred.
old Fred. You know, that prints that
Hello,
money in
Fred.
his basement. That's a that's not the that's what I'm talking about the Fed today. No, so with the Fed, but if you look at Japan, you know, it's interesting because Japan's debt right now is about 237% of their GDP, which is insane, right? I mean, that debt to income ratio is out of control. But you know, so you have a couple things that are at play, let's say around the world, but in the Asian region right now, because of this focus on China with the digital yuan, a centralized digital currency, really has nothing to do with blockchain or anything else. However, Japan, on the other hand, which has been more regulatory friendly in the crypto space, is also now, you know, diving headfirst into the shallow end, you know, as Chip likes to say, you know, but they're going, you know, hardcore right now because of what's going on in China. Now, so it's interesting, you know, when you have a country like Japan understanding, you know, that their debt is spiraling out of control, they need to get some sort of control on it. They see what's going on with China. They can't allow their position in the economic world to slip to China and let China get an upper hand with what China's trying to do with their Belt and Road initiatives and everything else.
Yeah.
But I find that interesting because Japan, you know, in contrast to China, potentially is pursuing a digital currency that is based on blockchain. And we know, like with SBI, with what they're doing with XRP and with Ripple and all of that. What do you see from that perspective? You know, as Japan comes to the forefront, is it a basket of currencies? Is it a Bitcoin? Is it an XRP? Is it something on blockchain, off blockchain? How is this going to look?
Firstly, let me just say, you know, when I said the Fed, I meant all world central banks are
Right.
printing like crazy. So I think, you know, the debt situation as it is, there won't be a way for the debt to be paid back. There'll be some kind of debt jubilee. But even before that is reached, there's going to be a transition to, I believe, Bitcoin. You know, today I saw some news that Turkmenistan is, I think, spending $700 million on Bitcoin mining operation. So that's one country that's jumping into mining. Iran's already started something with mining. There are other countries that are mining, and I'm sure there's countries that are mining that we don't even know about, that wouldn't even speak about it yet. So once these countries know about each other mining or putting Bitcoin in their reserves, there'll be a mad dash there'll be the country FOMO on Bitcoin.
Yeah,
and so there's a parallel economy happening. One is fiat and the other one is cryptocurrency.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And there's a lot of big operations that started. There's one in Texas. There's another one that I read about the other day. Massive Bitcoin mining operations. And then there's a power company in the U.S. that was basically started, like they have with the extra power, since it's municipality. They set up a mining operation, right? Because it's a way that they can add to profits. They can just go ahead and mine and accumulate, and they don't really need to spend it, but they're going long term. And the energy is pretty much free. They're not expending for it. So whatever they invest in a mining operation, server farms, whatever. And I saw it's kind of nice to see some other countries, because what we've seen happen in China, we only have a glimpse of what we think is happening there. We don't know that actually how much mining is going there. But with Hong Kong, by the way, I know you're English, but I would say you guys made the dumbest mistake ever, giving Hong Kong back to the Chinese. You should have just said, no, we're going to re-up for another 100 years. But, you see what's happening in Hong Kong. And so China really has an opportunity to take all that Bitcoin, go through Hong Kong. All of a sudden, they've got this phenomenally clean money. They're able to convert that, right? And we just don't know how extensive it is. But like you said, you mentioned Iran. You mentioned there's some other countries we don't know about that are starting to get into the whole mining thing. And really, people always say, like, well, when mass adoption, nobody still knows about Bitcoin, and they call cryptocurrency Bitcoin. It's almost like its own name. They go like, oh, you're into the Bitcoin. And sometimes they use that to describe the entire sort of cryptocurrency sort of a, genre. And they say, oh, you're into the Bitcoin, right? And it is great that it has sort of that brand name, because if it didn't have that sort of brand name, people wouldn't even know what to call it. And some people are still confused by it. But for the masses, one of the things that happened in the States was it came out, the ruling a couple weeks ago, that banks can custody crypto. And I think that's super necessary.
Big news, yeah.
Because people trust their bank. You don't have to teach them how to use their bank, because they go on their bank app and they buy Bitcoin or they buy, Ethereum. They don't need to care about their private keys, because I think the complication of it, and then the heart stopping when you have a cold storage wallet and something goes wrong with it, you need like oxygen, because we've all had those moments where you start panicking, hit the panic button. What do you see adoption in the future as you start seeing these fintechs really kind of rising up and sort of taking all the attention away from banks? Where do you see this going?
Well, what you just said there, that people trust their banks. There was a survey where I think it was like 95% of millennials don't trust their bank. And this is probably because of the financial collapse that happened in 2008, 2009. And so many houses got repossessed. A lot of the kids that were living in these houses are now adults, So millennials don't trust banks. They just think they're a necessary evil at the minute. But millennials are, and that's the biggest cohort we've seen, I think, ever. Millennials are, using apps such as blockchain.com and stacking sats instead of putting the money in the bank. And I just think this this rival economy is just going to keep growing until banks will have to switch into start to take Bitcoin if they want to survive. A bit like Blockbuster Video. You know, either you change or you die. Simple.
Yeah.
Simple.
That's a good point. But here's an interesting thought on this, you know, and it kind of goes to the amount of power that's required to mine Bitcoin, you know, and keep that going. And right now the estimates are, you know, comparable to the entire nation of Czechoslovakia, you know. So, you know, that's
Great
I'm trying to
place.
I'm trying to find where this quote came from, the Czech Republic. So it says here, according to Bitcoin energy consumption tracker, Digiconomist, Bitcoin currently consumes 66.7 terawatt hours per year. That's comparable to the total energy consumption of the Czech Republic, which has a population of 10.6 million. So that's what it's taking right now to mine the Bitcoin. But the question, I guess, would be, with all these countries getting into mining Bitcoin, do you believe that they're mining Bitcoin from a perspective that everybody wants to have it as a spendable currency, or is everybody mining Bitcoin because they see the writing on the wall that it's the perfect store of value and a potential replacement of physical gold as people go back to backing up their economies with a holding of something? You know, so right now no one really has that. So, you know, previously, you know, every economy had to have a backup of gold. And this is how we're propping up our economy. Now you switch to the digital economy, you back it up with Bitcoin. You're not spending it because of the mining aspect, the cost of it. The countries are going to do it regardless, but they want to stockpile as much as possible. But again, not to use, but to store value. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think, let me say a couple of points first. I read a quote the other day. Bitcoin doesn't just use a lot of energy; it uses a lot of wasted energy. So, like a dam when it's in the daytime when there's not that much energy consumption, a dam is just wasting energy. So you find a lot of Bitcoin farms in China next to dams where that energy is then being used to make Bitcoin. So a lot of the wasted energy around the world is pumped into Bitcoin. So I know people say it's the energy is wasted, but I don't think it is. And also, the current economic system, all the banks, you know, lighting up all them offices in Manhattan and all the offices around in London and all the financial districts around the world, and even on your high street, all that doesn't need to be there. You know, you don't need to go into a bank with air conditioning. You can do everything on your phone. So if you totaled all that energy use that is used by the traditional banking infrastructure, I'm sure that's way more than even Bitcoin mining at the minute.
Agreed.
So
That's a great point. Now, the other part of that to add in to kind of further your argument in that one point would be, you know, not just the brick and mortar aspect of it and having the employees and everything that it takes to operate the brick and mortar, but think about the transportation cost of moving all those employees from their homes to those banks, you know, to get to the brick and mortar. That, you know, great point.
And the energy spent on printing of notes, moving notes, the armored vehicles, all this razzmatazz, it's not needed no more. You just need your app, you need the blockchain, and you need some Bitcoin miners mining the cheapest energy in the world.
Yeah, I never really bought the argument. People say like, well, what about the energy it's consuming? And I talked about that one power plant that has excess and that they have excess power they can't do anything with. Right, yeah. It gets wasted, right? And really the big argument when I look at this, people say, well, it consumes energy. Well, what happens if the energy is not used, right? And that's a really good point you bring up, because if you look at, you know what it really wastes? It wastes fiat, right? Because you have to pay. So what happened with Bitcoin miners? They'd move to a country, a section of a place where it was inexpensive, right? Because they needed to offset the energy cost. But really, when you think about the energy itself, it's like they go like, but what's going to happen to it? Somebody has to utilize it. You know, here in the summertime in Florida, you know, our power bills are high because, you know, I mean, it gets wicked hot here. It's like 90% humidity. it's up, 30 degrees Celsius plus, 34, 35, or 99 degrees Fahrenheit. And so it's like, so what? It's like, so guess what? In the wintertime, that bill drops. But does anybody saying like, well, in Florida, they're just abusing the power because they're trying to be comfortable? Nobody gets into that argument. So I think it is a really good argument, for the whole idea of mining, because you see this with a lot of the other. Then I would say, the altcoins. People like, oh well, some of them, you don't have that energy cost. Like, so what? What does that matter? But you also don't have the value.
The end. What makes Bitcoin so secure is proof of work. The mining, the hash power. If that's not there, Bitcoin's not secure. Bitcoin's not secure. Your funds aren't secure.
But at some point, though, I mean, I don't know what year it is, but it's projected out. I mean, at some point, you will have all potential 21 million, and I'm sure there's 4, 5, 6 million that are probably gone forever. And if you look at the Satoshi bag that may or may never move, there's almost another, million there plus, right? So you have to look at what is the potential going long term, and at some point it does get mined, right? What's the actual year projected out to for the final
2140?
2140. It seems far away.
Everything is mined at that point, and then what?
The last Satoshi, but then your mining incentive is the transaction fees,
right? And what do you project those to be?
And at that point, I believe that the whole world, that every transaction in the world will be linked to the blockchain at that point, via second layer solutions and third layer solutions.
So let's talk about some advancements. So what is your thought about the Lightning Network? Because I thought initially it was a very strong idea, but to me, I'm not sure if it succeeds. What's your thought about Lightning Network? Do you see it being a value add?
Lightning is a cool idea, but it's still in its infancy, I believe, and you have to have these channels open to transfer Bitcoin, but sometimes the channels fail because the part of it's not isn't there anymore. So I think it's early days for Lightning. They need some upgrades on the Bitcoin algorithm. So I like
How do you do that? How do you do the upgrade? Yeah.
I mean, I'm not really a Lightning expert. I just keep an eye on it, but I don't really go into it. But there's other stuff like state chains, which is another way to move, which is another Bitcoin second layer solution, where you can send Bitcoin from one person to another. You send the private key. So if I was sending Bitcoin to you, I'd send you the private key, and then you could, when you're ready, you can then cash in the Bitcoin on your side.
Then you have immediate access to it at that point because it's yours. Now you own the private keys.
Right. But the way that works is there's a multi-sig involved and a secondary, another company involed.
Yeah, it has to be. So you have another party makes it more secure.
You have to have a third party, right?
Yeah. If state chains and Lightning can work together, then you can move large amounts of crypto, tiny amounts of crypto for virtually free and instantly.
Yeah, another way you can do it? There's something called the XRPL, the Xrp Ledger. And if you want to look at how much Bitcoin's been moved through there the last 3 months, the last quarter, it's just amazing. Why? Because it costs you pennies to be able to move it in 3-4 seconds. Now the only downside is that at some point, it can only handle so many transactions. So that's part of the issue. What is the XRPL capped at, Jeff? I don't even recall at this moment, but it's not 60 or 70,000. It's a lot lower. For some reason, it's evaded me, but it's amazing how I've seen people, especially in the Ethereum community, really latch on. There's been some friend exchange, some friendlies exchange there. So you got Ethereum people and XRP people, because all XRP, it really is a bridge currency. It's not. Its main usage is to get from, the interoperability from fiat to whatever, or from crypto to whatever. And that's really what its benefit is in 3-4 seconds. So when I started seeing all of the Bitcoin IOUs, you started seeing a lot of that stuff happening on the XRPL. It makes a lot of sense. It's like there's already something in place to be able to go ahead and send it to somebody if you send it through the XRPL. And I think that's where the brilliance came out. That's where you look at someone like a David Schwartz, who's the CTO of Ripple, but looking at, these guys all came out of Bitcoin. They're all Bitcoin guys. They love Bitcoin. And, they saw some of the same things you're referring to, which is, look, when it's open source and updating the algorithm, look, technology at some point, whatever was great 10 years ago, you have to upgrade tech as you move along. And this is one of the things where we see Lightning come in, trying to sort of patch it sort of together, right? But I look at, going down to the future of what you have to be able to move things quick, right? People expect quick transactions. What you're saying, with private keys, that's certainly one way. There's going to be some other ways, and as more tech comes aboard, now one of the things that Bitcoin has, not only the first mover advantage, right, first to market, but in the States, the SEC has already said 2+ years ago, that Bitcoin and Ethereum are not securities. So that's another huge advantage, right? And it also sets the stage for other altcoins out there. But they've been so slow. I mean, as the US goes, the rest of the world goes. And if you can't have some kind of clarity and regulations, and I believe they're coming. I believe it's based on what Brian Brooks, who's the acting comptroller, he has already said the other day in an interview that he believes that it's going to be weeks, not months. And you've already started to see banks being able to crypto, but we need that regulatory clarity. And I know in England you guys have it. Don't you guys have some clarity as far as regulations are concerned?
Pass. Don't really know.
No,
to me, I concentrate on Bitcoin. When you're talking about the banks there, I don't like interacting with my bank. I have minimal interaction with my bank. If I'm saving money, I'd save it in Bitcoin. If I have to pay a bill using my bank, I'll do it. But I'm waiting for the day when I don't have to use the bank at all. And trying to not use fiat as much as possible. So the sooner I can transfer onto Bitcoin only, the better. I think the banks are a vampire-like entity, just sucking the blood out of working people. And the sooner they get replaced by Bitcoin and even other cryptos, the better.
That's interesting. A couple points here, but the one, let's start with the banking aspect of it, because I find that, and I've heard the argument from others that are in the Bitcoin space that, in some utopia world, we're going to get rid of banks altogether. I believe that in order for mainstream adoption, you have to take away the personal responsibility aspect of moving your money. Because when you start moving it from a business perspective or an individual perspective, the majority of the people don't necessarily have either the know-how or the personal responsibility to embrace that kind of a world at this point. However, even with that being said, the exchanges that we operate through, or the third-party entity that we operate through, become a quasi-bank. So I agree with you from a perspective of the brick and mortars are completely out of control, and they control and dominate the populations all over the world, through high interest rates and high interest rates on borrowing and almost non-existent on holding. Whereas we should have a higher interest rate on holding, but that's where they have the one up on everybody, from your mortgage notes to everything. And even the cost of banking globally is ridiculous.
Yeah, totally what you're saying. So in the UK, my bank, I think, is 0.1% interest rate, right?
What is it?
0.1%.
Okay.
Right.
On what? On what side?
On what? On
9.1% on the borrowing side?
No, 0.1%,
Oh,
0.1%.
Yeah,
zero.
0.1.
Gotcha.
For a saving,
All right.
for a
Yeah,
saving
we're
account. Right?
Americans over here. So
Yeah.
Say
So,
not.
sorry. And and if you wanna
It's like
mortgage,
9.1%.
I don't know. It made
You
no
out of your
sense. I'm
mind,
like
son?
9.1. I'm going to the UK. This is awesome.
but if you wanna borrow from the bank, the minimum you're paying is 9, 10, 12%, right?
Yeah.
So
Yep.
so why is the spread so big?
Exactly.
No.
That's a great point.
Well,
It's
also the fees, though.
supporting their infrastructure, the personnel, all the nonsense, but you got to fill their pockets with a little bit of cash, everything else. But here's the other point, kind of going back to, some of the things that well, my initial question, which was store of value or cash, is Bitcoin going to become a transactional currency or a store of value? You brought up an interesting.
I suppose that depends on the size of the transaction. If you're moving 10 Bitcoin, that's a store of value. If you're moving 10 Sats, or 10, maybe 10,000 Sats, you're spending it. It's both.
From a transactional perspective, Chip brought up the XRPL as the mechanism to quickly move Bitcoin, to somebody else. Right now, we know that if you try to send a Bitcoin to someone, it's slow. It takes too much time. It could take hours. We want immediate transaction. But you brought something up that really resonates, which is being able to move the private key to somebody. And right now, if I had to give you a Bitcoin, I'd say, here's my private key to that account. Hey, it's all yours. You've got it. But that would probably not be the best way to do it. There has to be a mechanism in place, another third-party solution, a quasi-bank that moves that private key to you, because now you're in control of it, which is the benefit of the Bitcoin. So you don't want to have a double spend environment. So now I have to somehow lose control of that key. That means that I could never know what that key was to begin with. So if I'm holding it in an account, there has to be a generally globalized standard of how we're holding a Bitcoin if we're using that kind of scenario. Because, if I send you Bitcoin, it's on the blockchain, it's recorded, you have the Bitcoin, I can't double spend it. I can't do anything with it. However, if I'm sending you my key in that moment, if you're holding the key, I can go and say, hey, I'm moving that Bitcoin, and now you don't have it. Obviously, our transaction is dead at that point, and now you just, you could say, hey, we had a contract, now you stole my money. But if it was wrapped in a different wrapper where I didn't have control of that key, but now I sent it to you, and it's immediate, it's instant right there, because now, and so if you could touch on that a little bit, but just one more thought, this came up in terms of what Japan is working on, and what Japan was saying is that the majority of their population still likes to spend fiat. Credit card usage is minimal. They don't like the digital economy yet, but they're moving them in that direction. But in order to move them in the digital direction of the economy, they need to be able to spend that digital currency online and offline. So now if you're moving the keys, touch on that, this whole concept, I think is really interesting.
So there's a company out there developing state chains already, and the solution is pretty much ready. So that you can send your private key to somebody via this system, and they can pretty much instantly get that Bitcoin for a very, very small fee. And then there's nodes on that system that check that the key can't be double spent. So that solution's out there already. On the second part about Japan, Japan's got a aging population, and this population has got a lot of savings in the banks. As they see their central bank printing yen, they'll see that the value getting sucked out of their bank accounts, just like, and then they'll see friends that have taken up to saving in Bitcoin. They'll see that these guys ain't losing that value. It's like it took me time to get Chip into crypto, it'll take these people to get their friends into crypto. But when the proof is in the pudding, when they see that their value is getting sucked out, but their friend's value isn't, they'll start saving Bitcoin too. Just like countries will FOMO into Bitcoin. The system is a beautiful system. It aligns incentives for people to use the system, and for the system to be made safer via more and more hash power. It can't be stopped, I don't believe.
No.
And it's just a matter of time. We're just waiting for it to happen.
We are. Yeah, I wanted to kind of change up a little bit. Let's talk about Dr. Craig Wright. I think we all probably can agree that he's probably not Satoshi. But you've actually been in his presence a couple times, and so tell us what your opinion is of him. Like, I mean, he seems like a fun guy to go drinking with, but what's he like in person? Because, you know, a lot of times we see the public-facing guy where he's real brash and he's out there, you know, but then sometimes you see him in an off interview where he seems a little bit more laid back. What's your, you know, where do you see him as?
So yeah, I a few years ago I organised a dinner for Tone Vays in London with a few.
We'll talk about
friends.
Tone too, yeah.
And for a laugh, I said, "Should I invite Craig Wright?" And Tone said, "Yeah." So both of them came, and I sat them next to each other, and I was sitting opposite. And you know, I'm gonna say he's a delightful guest for dinner. Craig is. We had a good chat. It was funny. He was having a laugh. He's very knowledgeable on things. But maybe I shouldn't be saying this in public, but I think he might have a mental health problem, and people should see him for having a mental health problem, and he needs help. He doesn't need people to listen to what he's saying and then get triggered and go after him. The guy just needs help.
Gotcha.
You know? That's what I think.
Yeah. So you think he really does believe a lot of the stuff that he says, and he's just misguided with some.
Yeah. I'd tell you the truth. I've stopped listening to what the guy says. He just needs a doctor. Needs to take some time off. Just chill out. That's what
now. So Tone Vays is there as well, right? And he's a character, right? He's a character. So what's he like off camera too? Like, what's he like to hang out with? What were some of the interactions between, you know, Tone and Craig Wright? What were those like?
Tone's a very cool guy. Very cool. He's very humble. On screen, he's pretty much the same kind of guy. You know, I like Tone a lot. Got a lot of time for. Got a lot of respect for Tone. I know he bashes AltCoins, shit coins, but I've not got a bad word to say about Tone.
Yeah, he does really, and I'm okay with him bashing it. Look, I mean, you know, we at moments in time, you know, we've talked about different coins, different projects. You know, it's just one person's opinion. It might be my opinion or Jeff's opinion, or let's say a guest comes on here. But what I think I find a little bit offensive when he starts talking about, you know, these talking points about, like, for example, XRP, but he's done it with other coins as well, where it's almost like he never progresses or does any research. Like, I can just Google stuff sometimes and find it, like, because I want to learn about everything that's going on. But, like, for example, he comes after XRP. He's like, it's a banker's coin. It doesn't do this, doesn't do that. I'm like, well, like, when he gets on that whole tirade, because, you know, I remember watching one of his presentations he did where he was having an argument with people, and they were all talking about XRP and Ripple and all that. Yeah, Ripple is a centralized company. There's no doubt about it. XRP is decentralized. If Ripple falls off the map tomorrow and they disband the company, XRP is still going to be there. But so is Dogecoin, right? So, I mean, it's still going to be around. But what I find fascinating about the guy, because he is a funny guy, but when he doesn't even do some basic research and he still sticks to the talking points, it's okay. You don't have to like other coins. I get it. But if you don't even know some of the basic sort of principles and underlying methodologies about what they are, that's the part that I say, well, wait a minute, man, come on. You can do like a Google search and find some data on this. if you're going to hate on, just say, hey, I don't care for this. I'm a Bitcoin maximalist. I'm steeped heavy in Bitcoin. I just don't believe in other altcoin projects. That's fine. But to start ragging on something when you don't even have some basic knowledge, that's the part that kills me about the guy.
Well, I can't really comment on what he said or what he's not said, or because I've not heard him. But again, I think it goes back to tribalism.
Yeah.
He turns a Bitcoiner and he'll be Bitcoin until the end, I believe.
Yeah, he will be. So you had mentioned early in the conversation that you do hold some altcoins. Is there something you can talk about? Some other coins you own, or you want to mention them, or other projects you might hold some?
Yeah. I'll mention. I've bought some coins that are second layer solutions on Bitcoin. So I believe they'll
Like
do really
sidechain?
well. Yeah, sidechain technology.
Yeah.
So I think they'll do well. But buying altcoins was a bit of a mistake for me. For years I didn't touch them, and then I saw my friends making loads of money, and then I went in a little bit. But I believe there's great technology in a lot of altcoins, but we just got to see what happens in the future. Because this technology can be replicated by anybody.
Yeah. Well, what do you think? What do you stand on Bitcoin Cash?
Bitcoin Cash.
Yeah. Do you hold any of that?
I've got some from the hard fork.
Mm-hmm.
But I've not really kept abreast with what's going on. And I heard there's going to be a hard fork.
That's what I heard too.
Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin Cash ABC. It's too much for my small brain to comprehend.
And that goes back to the animosity within the community, right? They have disagreements, they change something, and you move away from what was good.
And then they press the fork
you go to the basic. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So here's a interesting idea. If you look around the world right now and you start seeing those countries that are engaging more and more with digital currencies and trying to find a way outside of their unstable currency. So, we're starting to see what's going on in Japan and China. We see what's going on over in Iran. Some of that has to do with a circumvention of the USD as a reserve currency. However, there's other countries like, what's going on down in Africa, what's going on over in Latin America, where individuals and businesses at a rapid pace are moving towards digital currency as a means of exchange of value, but payment, purchasing goods, retail, domestic and international from them. And it's happening at a faster and faster pace right now. And you're seeing a lot of that going on in Latin America, where we're starting to see an expansion in this movement to find somewhere where there's some stability. And look at the crypto market over the past couple of days. Bitcoin was just at 12,300. This morning, it's sitting at 10,200 and change. What kind of stability is that? But yet you have countries where their currencies are out of whack, and there's no safety net in their currency. Venezuela, amongst others. And what are your thoughts? Like immediate, current, today usage? Where would you? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think still we're very very early in the life of cryptocurrency, and the life of Bitcoin. It's been 10, 11 years for Bitcoin. It's been stable for that amount of time. But still, the people that hold Bitcoin are in the millions, the low millions, maybe 50 million at the max. 50 million wallets or whatever. But I think still there needs to be education. There needs to be people like us, like you guys, spreading the word, letting people know what Bitcoin and cryptocurrency are about, and how fiat is bad for them, really. It's like the evil empire. We're the resistance. We've got to spread the word again, like religion. But like I said, there's nothing stopping it, and eventually everything will move across. It's like the black hole. Bitcoin is just going to suck everything, all the financial infrastructure of the world, just going to get sucked into it. And we're just early on that path at the minute.
Yeah. It is early days. I think, you think 11 years in on Bitcoin, and it's really in the span of the cryptocurrency, it's just a couple of hours. If you look at the grand scale of it. But I think in 2020, I think for, maybe Jeff has a different opinion, but I'm starting to see people's attitudes changing a little bit. I think what accelerated the thought pattern on this really had to do with the lockdown, and people then all of a sudden, when you're going, and you have a routine every day, and all of a sudden you're sitting in your house, you're spending a little bit more time, you're starting to think about the world, you're starting to think about fiat currency, you're starting to think about your life as like a future sense. And I realized that being down for 5-6 months of, it's really opened up a lot in Florida, but there's still parts of the world that are still kind of closed down. And I think the best thing, I kind of feel like it's a weird thing to say, but the best thing that happened to crypto was this whole lockdown. I feel like it's accelerated the thought pattern, and I start seeing a lot more people changing their opinion. Even people that I know that started asking me more about, so tell me more about this crypto. Even my brother now who's into it, and we talk on a regular basis. He was the guy like me, like, that's the dumbest thing ever. And then,
I remember. Yeah.
And then we have this common friend who still is like, it's not backed by anything. Are you still into that? But interestingly enough, I did get a text that was asking a lot of questions about a particular coin, which I don't want to really go into, but asking me about something, thought it was an interesting project, thought it had a lot of value, but it was something that he saw in the value of the project that he could then retrofit into his world. In other words, they're doing this, that makes sense to me. It no longer had to do with, it's not backed by anything, right? Because really, what's fiat backed? Now in 71, when we got off the gold standard, yeah, you could go in and redeem gold. But when people have this argument about Bitcoin, and being the new gold, it's better than gold. It's outperformed the S&P 500. You can say what you want, the ups and downs and the crashes, but it's outperformed everything. There's no better value out there that you can hold Bitcoin against and said, oh, well, it's done horrible against.
Yeah, totally. Like you say, it's it's gone from 5 cents to 20,000.
Well, why weren't you punching me in the throat a little bit more back then? I mean, we could have.
Because I was over here. If I was over there, I would have done it.
That's true. I would probably. But it wasn't like I didn't buy it. I did, but I said you set 2 extra money. You're thinking, dude, I'm on top of the world. Like you're screaming. You're happy because back in the day it was. And even then, you're like a couple $100 for this imaginary coin, and then meanwhile we're like spending fiat like that means something, right? This USD, yeah. And I look at, we talked about a reset of some kind, some sort of a jubilee. It has to happen. The whole world's debt ridden. There's a guy over there. I don't know if you've been apprised of this guy named Charlie Ward. He's, do you know him, Charlie Ward, at all? I'll have to. Yeah. Anyway, but he's a guy that started talking about this. What's it called? The quantum something or other, but basically talking about debt jubilees, talking about Nasara, Jasara, all this stuff where debt forgiveness. But if you look at something, you got to go back to history. Look, we always repeat ourselves. And if you go back 2,000 years, the exchange was gold, silver, was precious metals, right? And so really, if you look at digital gold, a lot of times that's why we see Bitcoin compared to it, but it's better. Gold's hovering around $2,000. And, you can go back 4 or 5 years ago when it was around $1,200. Okay. And you can say, well, look at gold, but it's a stable. It is stable, but is that what people get into an investment for stable? When everything hits the fan and we got zombie apocalypse.
On that point, I'd say yes, because it's stable and all fiats trend downwards, you're making money on it. See, if you had 1 ounce of gold in the 70s, you could have gone to Savile Row in London and had yourself a suit made, right?
Yeah.
And that would have been £35, £50 at the time, right? Now, if you go to Savile Row with an ounce of gold, which is Well, I don't know, what is it, $2,000? Sorry, £2,000 amounts of gold around that area.
Yeah.
You can go and have a suit made for the same price, right?
Yeah.
But £35, you might be able to buy some of these silk knots. They're about a tenner. You know, you can't even buy a tie for that much.
Inflation.
No,
Yeah, inflationary for sure.
no. So
That's
that's
a
why.
good.
So that's why I say to my friends that Bitcoin shouldn't be measured in USD. It should be measured in grams or ounces of gold.
It's not a bad idea, and I do think that we have to. When we look at fiat the way it is today, and it's not backed by anything. That's why you see in the background, you see a lot of these countries. They've been loading up on gold for the last 5, 10 years, right? So you kind of feel like, well, what's that all about, right? I mean, if you're not really spending it, if you're not, I mean, yeah, there's a market for it, but I also think it's been artificially suppressed for a long time as well. Because
Yeah.
let's say that they talk about, and this is actually a really good point you bring up, Mr. End. If you talk about, let's say gold does rise, goes to 5, goes to 10K, then if you were able to tie that back to a measure, because gold is probably finite as well at some point, right? I mean, the Bitcoin it's one of the great things about whoever Satoshi was, this 21 million. You think about now how reserved it is, right? So there's not a lot of people who actually really holds it. Who's going to be hodling long term? Who's not going to be? It's so scarce, which really adds to the value.
Yeah. On that point, every time Bitcoin's lost, that's a deflation in Bitcoin. So every time a newbie loads up, 0.1 Bitcoin on a Trezor and then forgets to write down the seed and then loses a Trezor, that Bitcoin's lost, right? So that's deflation in the system. But Bitcoin is not only deflation; it's inflationary as well, because every 10 minutes there's more Bitcoin added to the system.
Mm-hmm.
But Bitcoin also, what people got to understand, is deflationary as well, and that happens at the halving every 4 years. The rate, the amount of Bitcoin that comes out every 10 minutes, approximately, halves. So there's three different. So there's inflation, deflation, and disinflation happening at the same time. It's a magical system.
Magical, like little fairies.
Yeah. I'm going
Yeah.
back. I'm trying to think about this from a perspective of gold. And Chip, you brought something up where maybe at some point gold will be finite as well. I mean, there's a certain amount that's circulating in the world that's being held in reserve in jewelry, etc. I don't know if we know. I don't know if the geologists know how much is actually in the ground, other than they're constantly finding new mines. So is it truly finite? But you brought up a good point when it comes to whether it's Bitcoin or or XRP or whatever it might be. You know exactly what the number is, and then you decrease the a certain percentage for that's lost. And that becomes a finite solution. Better than, you brought that up, better than gold, better than any other fiat currency for sure, because it prevents governments from constantly printing and printing and printing and printing, putting us in this scenario. Whereas if you focus in on a digital currency like the digital yuan, it's not finite. It's finite in terms of how much the government wants to print. A digital dollar that Maxine Waters was trying to promote a few months ago. Also, it's not finite. It's just controlled by the government, and it's another mechanism of controlling the people. So, Mr. M, what are your thoughts about this? If you look at, digital asset, Bitcoin, XRP, Ethereum, whatever, finite, versus obviously the fiat, but more versus these digital currencies that are trying to be promoted through the CBDCs, like the digital yuan or this fictitious digital dollar.
So just going back to your point about gold on Earth, the amount of gold on Earth is definitely finite. On the sphere that we call the world, there's only X amount of gold there. The difference between gold and Bitcoin is gold is not destroyed. It, it gets used. It's either gets used as a coin, it gets used as jewelry or insulate, or like a foil on a rocket or whatever. But it doesn't really get destroyed, so it's not lost. But Bitcoin is lost. So going to Plan B's stock to flow ratio, Bitcoin will always go have a higher stock to flow ratio than gold, especially it'll happen at the next halving, right? So it becomes the most scarce resource known to humanity. Okay, and your other question was?
No, if you take that concept and now look at the fact that some of these countries like China is creating the digital yuan, or in the U.S. through Maxine Waters, they're talking about this digital dollar. So it's not finite in any way, shape, or form.
So when I saw the Fed said that their printing policy now is infinite, I was so shocked. It just numbed me. And then if they're now going to make a digital coin, which I believe they are, and China as well, they're all just a bag of shit. And people will realize this, and they will flock to Bitcoin, I believe.
Well, that's a good point. I've always been anti. People have said, like, well, but the digital dollar is going to be good because it'll bring people. I think it will bring people, not in the way that they think, because if they start using the digital dollar, you want to be able to draw the distinction that the digital dollar, which can be printed by the Federal Reserve, is not the same as blockchain. And if it's not transparent and we don't know, we don't even know if it's true blockchain. But when I look at, a lot of people don't realize that the Federal Reserve is a private corporation. It's not the U.S. government. It's a private corporation that's never been audited. Nobody really knows what their balance sheet looks like. And what they do is they loan the money to the U.S. And then you got to pay. And this is where all this debt, this is where our system of debt and enslavement has come from, where you see things like Bitcoin and other altcoins, which are moving population and moving us in a different direction, because the enslavement is, okay, now you have to pay interest. So it's loaned at an interest rate. So now we get into this nonstop debt of interest and enslavement of the population, where this is one of the greatest things about digital assets together. They are pulling people, they'll drag them along, but really against all this. And this is where you start seeing where the Fed may, I've always said, just audit the Fed, because it's a corrupt organization. What's funny? It's like, early on in 2016, 2017, they were moving into, okay, now it's time. I think we have this schedule. They schedule it every 5 to 8 years where we're going to have a recession. And then this is how things are going to go. And then we're going to raise interest rates and blah, blah, blah. But all of a sudden, they changed their tune when all of a sudden people started asking questions about audits, and you started seeing politicians saying, well, wait a minute. And all of a sudden, they're like, oh, no, we're good. And then they come out and say, just print indefinitely. We don't care about, debt. We don't care about that. Nobody cares. Everything's great. It's all going to be okay. And you're thinking to myself, you start looking around going, are we the only ones noticing what's happening? I think you're seeing more and more people out there starting to notice what their central banks are up to, the corruptness, more so now in the last 5-6 months than in any point of the last several years. Would you kind of agree with that?
Yeah, I agree totally with it. If you're just a normal Joe going to work every day, normal kind of job, 2.4 children, whatever, you're going out and you're working, but you're not working for yourself. Mm-hmm. You're working for yourself, your family, but you're also working for the Fed, because they're taking that 2% every year. Do you know what I mean? They're enslaving you mostly without you even knowing it. That's the sad part. And it's a private company.
Yeah,
it's total enslavement.
And at some point, it's people wake up and they say, this doesn't really make a lot of sense. Why are we continuing down? And that's why I like a lot of the conversations I'm hearing. Look, 2020. I think I saw a meme the other day where it said, Was a meme that said, "Hey mom, if that's still, is it still on the table that you can slap me in the upside the head because I'm ready for that?" Because 2020 has been a crazy year, but in a lot of ways, 2020 has accelerated conversations where it's been a good conversation for digital assets. Where am I going wrong on this, Jeff?
Man, I think you're spot on. I just think it's funny get hit upside the head with it, but it's man, 2020 has been an interesting year. Obviously, there's powers that be around the world that are trying to stoke division amongst the
Yeah.
populace, but they want to create the division amongst the people because they have another agenda that the
100%.
people they're
100%.
right the people they're using on the ground are just pawns in the game. But while that's all going on, look at what's happening. I mean, we're seeing, it's amazing to me, where the digital currency space blowing up, there's more and more development in this space. The stock market is still doing strong, even on, the tech companies. The one thing that just gets me, it's amazing to me, is the amount of wealth that's transferred on a regular basis, and companies that are being bought, companies being created, the amount of money being spent and passed around, and a lot of these legacy companies are just disappearing, and it's crazy because you look at like Lord and Taylor's, a major retailer in the United States going into bankruptcy and going out of business, along with Sears and JCPenney and all these other, they're old legacy systems, right? You don't necessarily need them. Go back to the smaller, clothing stores where you have more, personal experience, or customer experience, but that's kind of the direction we're going in, because I think even with the digital asset space, it's more of a P2P kind of environment, more concierge. People want to be, treated and taken care of, but what's going on in this from an economic perspective is mind-boggling. I mean, it's, again, the tech space, billions, millions, I don't know. And then you start seeing, seed, startup companies, getting all these rounds of funding. You've seen, $10 million by money's being thrown all around, right? I mean, it's crazy.
Rich people can get money very cheaply, and a lot of it from banks. The average man can't, but a rich VC guy can go to his bank and just get 10, 20 million out, no problem, on a loan, and then invest that in what he wants.
And whatever they want to do.
But that doesn't trickle down to Joe Public.
Right.
So we've got to take the power away from the banks by not using their systems because they're corrupt. We've got to use our new system, which Satoshi gifted to us.
Right, and it's interesting how that whole thing looks at, because the other thing too is we got the very first bank charter granted to a fintech out of San Francisco, and you're going to start seeing more of this. Jeff brought this up early days where he said, our exchanges going to move more into the banking space. There's certain regulatory stuff where they need, the way they're moving money and handling it, that they need that sort of that banking license. So a banking charter now allows a fintech to operate like a bank, and have the same sort of they don't have the interstate sort of things where they had to go in each state. It's just now global. It's all over the U.S. And the other thing that Jeff's brought up too is the fact that, will banks move into the exchanges? Will we see a major bank go after a big exchange? Like, is Coinbase? We see like a Bank of America or a Wachovia, or not? It's not Wachovia anymore. Is Wells Fargo or one of these, the Bank of England, go and buy one of these exchanges? Would we see something like that happen where they could potentially, they start seeing that, hey, don't forget that Blockbuster, which you brought up early, which was a video rental place, they had the opportunity to buy Netflix early days. They could have got in there and bought it, and they thought, oh, this isn't a threat, until it was too late. It's the frog in the blender, right? Or the frog in the pot. It starts heating up, everything's cool, feels weird, all of a sudden next thing you know, you're boiling.
Yeah.
Last to know.
Yeah.
Type of scenario. So we'll see what happens with this whole thing, but I love what's happening regulation wise, and I love Brian Brooks that's accelerating the conversation. The SEC has been just absolutely, we hear about Crypto Mom, Hester Pierce, they call her Crypto Mom, and I'm like, well, when is the crypto part of Crypto Mom gonna go in? Because it's been 3 years and she's like, I have an idea. Here's what we're gonna do. We can allow new startups to basically have a coin and release it, and they'll have 3 years to build something. I'm like, okay, That's fantastic, but it's just an idea. Everything's a good idea until somebody has to do something, and the SEC has done nothing in this space.
So I know we're talking about banks buying exchanges, but let me ask you guys a question. What do you think about DEXs like BISC? So it's a decentralized exchange, not based in one location. So you can't take it down. Why do we need banks to buy exchanges? Why don't we use DEX?
Yeah, so I think that's interesting. I've looked at the decentralized space. I like the automation process. I like the decentralized concept. Kind of like in a perfect utopia world, is it great? It all operates somehow behind the scenes. You don't need people. At the end of the day, though, you have to. There has to be some person mechanism in place. I just believe that's where the majority of the population is. I think there's some areas where, from a decentralized perspective, it's definitely fitting. But if you get into a real estate transaction, you get into a business transaction, you get into a retail transaction, there's always going to be a human element. It's never perfect. So I think part of it can be automated within a decentralized framework. But let's say you're buying a piece of property. Hey, it's great. You want to sell me your house. I want to buy your house. However, even in a decentralized environment, there's certain things that need to happen within that transaction that I'm going to feel more comfortable that it's not a purely decentralized platform. I want to know there's some framework of comfort that if something happens in the transaction, I'm getting my money back.
So
Because
you could just use
you need that.
Just use an escrow.
Yeah, you could use an escrow there, but then that escrow is run by a company, right? So there's still. So my point is that there's always going to be an element. It's not going to be the structure it is now. So I think within the banking space, like you said, can we decentralize a lot and automate our payment process? I think we can take out the human element of error. You can create the smart contract, you can create the escrow, but someone has to have that. Someone has to hold that. Right now in today's world, I don't want to be in a fully decentralized platform, because if my money goes up there, and even though it's in an escrow and a smart contract, you want to pick up the phone and call somebody. That's just where the world is at. At some point, can we move in that? I think it's going to happen in stages. The idea of decentralization, interesting. There's definitely a play for it, but I don't think the world's ready for it. I mean, it could be 10, 15, 20, allow there to be some sort of a blockchain adoption, and then you kind of move in phases. But that's why I believe there has to be, there's going to be an environment where, again, just one final point, and then let Chip talk. But you have, wherever I'm holding my money, again, I don't want to have, as a mainstream investor, I don't want to have 100% responsibility, over if something happens technically with my money. You want to be, again, most people want to have it someplace where you can pick up the phone and talk to a human being to say, hey, I screwed up, or hey, I need help, or whatever it is. That's where you have, and what you were talking about earlier, get rid of the brick and mortars. You don't necessarily need them all. You need a couple locations, offices where there's some, a handful of people that are working. And if you're in the US, they're US employees. They're not in India. They're not in Egypt or Mexico. Have them in the US. Let that US customer support the people, but it has to be a framework structured that. Chip.
Yeah. Well, I'll just say this, we kind of already starting to get used to this of not being able to call somebody. Jeff, you ever buy like a phone that Google put out? Try to call them about something. Try to get through to somebody like a human. You go like, hey man, this phone's defective. I just need to talk to somebody. I want to know that. No, man, there's nothing. It's like you can't. And even if you have this relationship, which I have had relationships with Google on a high level, spending upwards of 400,000 plus USD a month, and getting a new representative every 3 months who's some kid just came out of college, doesn't understand. You spend 2 weeks explaining what you want to do, and then 3 months later you get a new rep. So we're already kind of being conditioned to go down this road of not expecting too much. It's like you jump on a website. Now think about it.
People don't want that though, Chip. People don't want it.
No, I get that they don't want it.
Right.
They don't want it. They want personalization. I get that, but AI is going to shift a lot of that stuff. And I'll tell you, a lot of times you get on a chat, you go to a website, you want to call them, but then boom, can I help you? Yeah, we've already moved people away from, instead of calling, I'm going to chat with somebody, and I don't even know I'm speaking to a bot who's handling some of the stuff. And as AI progresses, that interaction, I'm just happy that I said, yeah, well, what's your account number? Okay, here's my account number. Oh, here's what's going on. I don't have to talk to anybody. So there are different levels of interaction. And I think with artificial intelligence getting better and better and better of being able to replicate and understand what what humans want, I think it'll shift some of that. But I think ultimately, if people aren't doing stuff anymore, what are all these people going? What are these 7 billion people in the world going to do? They're going to sit around and watch YouTube videos all day? I think it's a great concept. We'll make videos all day and it's be great, but what are we going to do, man? We needed something to do. Am I wrong, Mr. N? What are we going to do with our time if we're not working anymore?
Leisure and art.
There, yeah, that's right. A lot of museums, but they're closed now.
Shout out to P-Boy who designed this artwork behind me of Dorian Nakamoto.
Nice, yeah. That's awesome.
P-Boy from Paris.
That's really cool.
That looks good. It's nice.
And that's constructed out of what? What is that made with?
It's this is a print of an artwork, and the original artwork's made out of USDs.
There you go.
Oh, seriously?
They do have some use.
Oh wow, that's interesting. It
like
looks
in Venezuela.
Drawing. That's interesting.
That's what they use for kindling. That's how they start fires. They take the banknotes and they just put them in a pile and they put the wood over top of it. they just burn it. But anyway.
Soon it'll be like,
Yeah. So anyway, listen, we're coming up on time. Mr. N, I wanted to thank you so much for being with us again. I have forever in your gratitude. Thank you for being that friend who always never stopped and hitting me over the head that made me think, what is this guy so crazy about Bitcoin for? I better really look at this because he's all in on this. And so if it wasn't for that consistent sort of I guess and you never did it in a way that was like, you got to know, you talked about the benefits of it. You talked about what was great about it. And I think that was always the right approach. I think talking about, because some people get really emotional about stuff and they're like, you don't get it, but that's the wrong way. You just talked about, here's why it's great. Here's what's interesting about it. Here's where I think it's going. Here's where I think the technology will lead. And here's what I think the benefit of it will be. And that was the part that really, and this is also good for anybody else out there trying to get their friend and say, talk about benefits, talk about, their fiat not being worth anything, or their 401ks, which we have here, or is there going to be a pension if you think you're getting a pension 15 years from now? These were some of the things that you said early days. So I want to thank you for that always, because I wouldn't be on this channel doing this stuff if it weren't for you really kind of blazing the trail. And then, it hits me and I get other people, and this is really a grassroots effort. So I want to thank you, Mr. N, for never stopping that conversation. And I want to leave you with, last words on before we get out of here.
Yeah, I appreciate your kind words there, Stephen. I'd just like to say thank you to both Stephen and Jeff, and peace, love, and Bitcoin.
peace and love, like Ringo always says, peace and love, peace and love. Now, what if he adds Bitcoin to that? I think it would be amazing, right? Peace and love and Bitcoin. And all of a sudden, Ringo will have the biggest effect on the baby boomers. Be like, wait a minute, Ringo's saying buy it, I need to do it. So before you, and also too, I want you to hang around too after we run we close this down, but hang around, don't go anywhere. But Jeff, great conversation tonight. It was really cool to talk about the decentralization of the world. What are your thoughts before we get out of here?
Man, well, now I know who to blame for putting you into this space and getting into YouTube and all the rest. So no, this is I appreciate you coming on. This was really interesting, the conversation, getting into Bitcoin. It'd be awesome to have you back on again to really, deconstruct this even further, because there's so much, again, getting rid of the maxi ideas. There's a lot of projects, there's a lot of development, and talking about the Bitcoin and really thinking about some of the ideas of how you can take Bitcoin and make it more mainstream, something people overlook, but then not overlooking all the other amazing projects out there. So appreciate that. I want to say thank you to everybody that comes in and hangs out with us every Sunday evening, 8 p.m. And we get a lot of people from all over the world that are hanging out with us when it's 2:30 a.m., 3 a.m. The other evening it was like 4 a.m. And people are hanging out with us on their end. So we appreciate all you guys. Doesn't matter what part of the world you're in. Just a big thank you. And also a reminder, as you check out the other videos on the channel, we have some short form videos that pop up. We're doing our live streams. So, I have a live stream every Saturday morning at 8 a.m. that you guys are familiar with. Chip is doing a live stream. Hopefully we'll see the XRP Minute back on Wednesdays. But Chip has been putting out some amazing short form videos. So I definitely encourage everybody to go check those out. And really thank you to everyone who supports our efforts here within the On the Chain community.
Well said, Jeff. Thank you so much for bringing that up. And if you haven't liked, subscribe. If you're new here, one person who's still here, just go ahead, like, subscribe, click that notification bell. That way you'll know any new video we drop, whether it's a live stream notification or whatever, you'll be notified. And thank you again for your support. Mr. N, we are out of here. Hang out a little bit. We're going to go out. And when does it start, Jeff?
Let's go out in style.
Boom.
Are you down with OTC? Please like, subscribe, and click the bell to be notified when the next video drops.